Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. I want to correct something that I've been saying the last several days. I don't think the United States should come against Saudi Arabia as such, because they're valuable partners, and we need them in the fight against Islamic extremism coming out of Iran. Nevertheless, it looks like there is a guy, they call him MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And it looks like it was his hit team that killed the journalist, and who's been, terrorizing his brothers, holding them hostage, taking ransom from them, and enacting sort of thuggish type of behavior. The president has the power, he said, if he takes his authority away from him, that he will be gone. I think he's the one they need to deal with. We don't need to sanction the Saudis. We certainly don't need to do something like that. It would be very foolish. But this one man, apparently, is the author of some of these horrible things. And I think he should be dealt with severely. And his father's the king. And it's time the king say, I'm sorry, son. You've stepped over the line and you're out of office. It's just that simple. Now let's take a look at what's happening in the Middle East. I think when Israel pulled out of Gaza, it was a great mistake. But there are Israeli settlers in there who had prosperous farms and businesses, and they were forcibly ejected. Well, what came into Gaza? Hamas. And now it looks like they're on the brink of war. A rocket fired from the terrorist group Hamas struck a home in southern Israel. And now the Israelis say, we're going to fight back. Their warplanes hit 20 different targets inside Gaza today. Wendy?
The retaliation comes after Israel's defense minister warned about a potential war in Gaza, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised painful blows against Hamas. As Chris Mitchell tells us from Jerusalem, the threats come after 7 months of violence along Israel's southern border.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel may choose a different way to confront Hamas's violence.
We're close to a different kind of action. This action will include very painful blows. If Hamas is smart, it will cease its fire and violent outbursts now.
Hamas-led riots began on March 30th. IDF spokesman Jonathan Conricus told CBN News Hamas plans events for different days. On Monday, it's the beach.
For instance, Mondays are always the naval riots, when they embark from the Gaza harbor and they try to breach into Israeli waters.
Friday is the weekly main event,
where an average of about 18,000 rioters gather in 6 different locations, trying to violently get across into Israel, becoming more and more violent. We see a clear escalation in violence in the weapons that they use. Last Friday, the most violent attempt, IEDs were placed by Palestinians on the fence, were detonated, and that blew a hole in the fence through which 20 or so Palestinians got in, and they tried to assault an IDF position. Hamas is actively pushing Palestinians towards the fence, really escalating the level of violence and trying to get Palestinians killed on the fence.
Ambassador Michael Oren addressed the Gaza situation to Christian journalists from around the world.
The demonstrator is the new missile. It's actually a better missile, because in most cases it's multi-usage, and they get the picture. They get the picture of innocent kids being killed by Israel, which causes the same type of damage. It erodes our national legitimacy.
Earlier, CBN News got a first-hand look at what Israeli soldiers have faced for more than half a year.
It's not legitimate and civilian riot. The leaders of the riot is Hamas, and they are trying to challenge us.
Hamas has also flown hundreds of arson balloons into Israel that burned thousands of acres of Israeli farmland. The goal of Hamas is to infiltrate into Israeli border communities to attack Israeli civilians.
It should be very clear to our enemies that there is a limit to the amount of violence that can be tolerated, to the amount of terror that is inflicted upon Israeli civilians. And of course, IDF has the tools and the capabilities to defend against us.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's an example of what happens when you try to make nice with terrorists. You see, the government of Israel, under a previous prime minister, decided, oh, look, we're going to be nice. We're going to give Gaza back to the Palestinian Authority, and we'll live in harmony and peace together. Well, it just didn't work that way. But say a number of Israeli settlers who had prosperous lives in the Gaza area and were building up something there responsibly, they were forcibly ejected by Israel. Forcibly ejected. It was a tragedy. At the time, I mentioned it was bad, and of course, I got a lot of heat for that. Many times, I'm a little ahead of the game, and when the guys finally catch up, it's too late. But in any event, we spoke at that time. It was a mistake. It was a terrible mistake to force Israeli settlers to leave Gaza. If they hadn't given it over, it wouldn't have had. But now they have a terrorist outpost, and instead of the Palestinian Authority taking charge, Hamas took charge.
They just brought the enemy closer.
That's all they did. I mean, but when they forced the Israeli settlers out, and oh man, I got all kinds of trouble when I mentioned the fact that this was a terrible thing to do.
Yeah, I saw a documentary on that once, on that withdrawal from Gaza, and it was heart-wrenching. These people, the Jewish people, did not want to leave. This was their homes. They had families. They had farms. It was so heart-wrenching. Well,
it was forcible, too. The Israeli government forcibly caused those people to leave. It was a dreadful mistake.
But, you know, that's how bad they want peace. And, you know, if we were living in that, with the rockets falling on us daily, we might be that desperate, too.
That's right.
You know? But you're right. It ended up being one of the biggest mistakes they ever made.
It was terrible. But you can't make peace. It's like trying to placate a crocodile and make him believe he's going to be nice and not try to eat you. That's not going to work that way. But Hamas has come in. So what's Israel faced with? It'll look bad if they send planes, as they have, to bomb targets in Gaza. It'll look bad. It'll look like they're being bullies. But what they may have to do, and they maybe should have done, was to go in and take over that area again and say, look, we made a big mistake. We're going to set up settlements again. They should have done it, but they didn't, and now it may be too late. In any event, we are on the side of peace. We want peace. We want people to live in peace together. But you've got a terrorist group. Their whole modus operandi, their raison d'etre, their reason to be is action, forcible action against Israel. That's how they get their money. That's who supports them. And they're not going to be at peace ever, not ever, with Israel. Well, new reports could escalate a diplomatic crisis between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. As I mentioned before, it looks like that Prince MBS is the main actor. John Jessup has more on that.
That's right, Pat. Published reports are now connecting the Saudi crown prince to the suspects in the disappearance of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Dale Hurd has the story.
A pro-government Turkish newspaper has published a gruesome account of the alleged murder of Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, showing the writer was tortured before he was killed. The Saudi Consul General reportedly is heard on tape saying, "Do this outside. You're going to get me in trouble." He was told, "Shut up if you want to live." And a New York Times report says 3 of the suspects in the alleged Saudi hit squad served as part of the Crown Prince's security team. President Trump, who earlier warned of severe punishment if the kingdom was found responsible for Khashoggi's disappearance, warned against rushing to conclusions.
And it depends whether or not the king or the crown prince knew about it, in my opinion. Number one, what happened, but whether or not they knew about it. If they knew about it, that would be bad.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived in Turkey today after holding talks with Saudi leaders in Riyadh.
In each of those meetings, I stressed the importance of them conducting a complete investigation of the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi. And they made a commitment. They said they would do that.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, a longtime Saudi supporter, warned of a serious problem in the U.S.-Saudi relationship if the royal family was involved.
He had this guy murdered in a consulate in Turkey, and to expect me to ignore it, I feel used and abused. We're going to sanction the hell out of Saudi Arabia.
But some experts do not expect a serious breach in U.S.-Saudi relations, even if the royal family is held responsible. Because with Iran expanding its influence in the region, there's too much at stake.
The United States is supporting Saudi Arabia in its military efforts against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels inside Yemen. So it's a very complex picture.
That's one reason some expect Washington to try to help Saudi Arabia find a way out of the political mess it faces over the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. And Pat, as that expert just said, it is a complex situation there.
It's complex, but it's relatively simple. There's one guy who's the actor, and it's MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And he has taken power. He's acting like a thug. He's got thugging people working for him. And he's decided he's going to beat up on anybody he wants to. The whole government of Saudi Arabia shouldn't have to bear the price of him. So turn him over. The king, I mean, how many princes have they got over there? They've got so many pretenders to the throne. They've got all these brothers of the founder of Saudi Arabia's, Ibn Saud, and he had a whole bunch of sons, and they in turn have got a whole bunch of sons. There are plenty of princes. They can pick one to run the country. They don't have to go along with MBS. So I think it's time they offer him up, and Trump's got to say to the king, look, you know, we can't hurt you because we're friends, but you've got to give us a sacrificial lamb, and that's who we want. We want his head on a platter. End of story. Well, President Trump is out campaigning. He's got something to say, and here's John with more on that.
That's right, Pat. President Trump says his campaigning for Republican candidates is having a, quote, very big impact. The president told the Associated Press he thinks he's helping people. Meanwhile, recent economic news is helping. Unemployment now at a nearly 50-year low, with more jobs available than there are unemployed people. An index by the World Economic Forum says for the first time in a decade, the United States economy is the most competitive in the world. Still, President Trump thinks we could be doing better. He criticized Fed Chairman Jerome Powell for raising interest rates and creating a drag on the economy. Well, conservative voters are also happy with the president for putting Justice Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. In fact, both Democrats and Republicans are reporting a boost in polling and fundraising following Kavanaugh's confirmation. And as CBN's Jenna Browder reports, the battle may have woken up an otherwise sleepy Republican base.
The countdown to Election Day is on as Democrats and Republicans battle over the control of Congress. On both sides, the message is simple. Everyone must vote. The big question, who will actually turn out?
You know, if there's anything that excites Republican voters, it's the Supreme Court.
Kayleigh McEnany, national spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee, says she's confident GOP voters know what's at stake.
But what's interesting here in particular, we're seeing the 2016 effect play again. A Pew poll showed a few months ago, 1 month ago, I should say, a 12-point gap, Democrats ahead of Republicans. That has narrowed to just 2 in the wake of the post-Kavanaugh revelations and confirmation process.
Axios calls it the Brett bounce. Up until the contentious Kavanaugh Supreme Court fight, Democrats seem to have most of the energy. But now the polling pendulum appears to be swinging. In North Dakota, for example, a Fox News poll shows Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp down 12 points from her Republican challenger, Representative Kevin Cramer. Last month, she was only down 4 points. And an NPR PBS NewsHour Martis poll finds Democratic enthusiasm from earlier this year has all but disappeared.
My sense in covering politics in 2018 is that anger is the single most unifying force, galvanizing force you can have.
ABC News political director Rick Klein says anger is fueling both sides, and one survey gives Democrats a slight edge heading into November. The Washington Post Schar School survey shows likely voters in 69 House districts prefer Democratic candidates to Republican candidates, 50 to 46%. Klein says the Democrats' loss in the Kavanaugh confirmation could translate to a midterm win.
If you lose a battle, there's nothing better to motivate your base to go out there and vote the next time. And by that I mean Republicans, they get their Supreme Court pick. That means Democrats are going to say, well, we got to go do something to try to change this.
But each of you will have a chance in just 4 weeks to render your verdict on the Democrats' conduct at the ballot box.
President Trump is also banking on Kavanaugh's confirmation and the Democrats' handling of it.
You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob.
In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. Well, the death toll from Hurricane Michael is still rising. So far, we know the storm has killed 29 people across 4 states. Nearly half of the fatalities happened in Florida's Bay County, where the Category 4 storm made landfall. The number of dead could continue to rise as authorities search the devastated areas. Hurricane Michael was, of course, one of the most powerful storms to hit the United States, and Panama City Beach resident Steve Wilkerson saw its full force. The high winds toppled trees right on top of his home. Steve thought it was going to cost thousands to clean up, but he didn't spend a cent, thanks to Operation Blessing.
Like so many communities in the Panhandle, the city of Lynn Haven, Florida is dealing with a very real problem, and that is of huge trees down over driveways, on top of people's cars, and worst of all for folks, on top of their homes. And many residents do not even know where to begin. But Operation Blessing is looking to change that. 69-year-old Steve Wilkerson survived the nightmare of Hurricane Michael, but ended up with enormous pine trees on his home. He described enduring the storm.
A roaring sound outside, the wind, things flying horizontally, 4 big crashing sounds when the trees hit the house. All of us were surprisingly calm. Maybe we were just so scared it was to the max and we couldn't feel it anymore. It's just normal to be scared. But the house survived.
Steve and his family are grateful to be alive, but recovery has been a challenge.
There's no power, no water, no telephones, no internet. I'll bet it would be $15,000 to $20,000 to move every tree out of my yard because I have a lot of big trees.
Steve had no idea what would happen next. Operation Blessing volunteers rolled up with chainsaws and heavy moving equipment.
And when y'all drove up today, to be honest, I thought it was just another crew coming up, you know, well, $2,000 a tree, we'll remove them all. And then in comes these smiling faces with God's love in their heart and their mind. And I'm totally stunned and moved. You know, it's hard to keep from crying. And I like to think I'm a pretty tough old guy, but, you know, sometimes tears are appropriate.
Drew Anthony drove from Georgia to be a part of Operation Blessing's disaster relief volunteer force.
When you see that joy, when you see that hope, you know, someone that's gone through so much, obviously, and you're able to just be that love and that arm around their shoulders. I mean, it's there's nothing like it. You walk away with a smile on your face because you're just excited to help out.
Members of Lighthouse Church also came out to help.
We appreciate you guys for coming in and just kind of being a part of our church, because we couldn't do all this without you guys either. So it's a great partnership with everyone. Appreciate CBN and Operation Blessing. It's just an awesome network. So honestly, wasn't that familiar with them before this, but man, they're on top of it. You guys have some good people.
It's a privilege to meet you and spend time with you.
Really. If you ever doubt God's love, survive something like this and you will see it all around you.
I really like what Steve said, Pat. Smiling faces with God's love. That's Operation Blessing.
If you ever doubt God's love, look around you. People are showing love. And Operation Blessing is usually the first on the scene and the last to leave. We're in there with helping those people. We've got mobile kitchens giving them hot meals. We've got crews full of equipment, trucks full of necessary building equipment so they can get in there with the necessary saws and axes and so forth to take away the trees, to take away the debris, and also to help rebuild those homes. We're there for them, and we've got skilled people to do it. So if you want to participate, this is your chance. And Wendy, you've got something more too.
Yeah, we need volunteers, Pat. The relief efforts, as you see, are going to be there ongoing for a while. Operation Blessing needs your help. Volunteers should meet at the OB Mobile Command Center located at Lighthouse Church. That's 1616 Allison Avenue in Panama City Beach, Florida. Volunteers must be 18 years old and able to get transportation to and from the work site. And for more information about volunteering, just call the number on your screen, 1-800-677-7974, 1-800-677-7974, or you can go to obi.org. And that story really got me.
I noticed you do. You're over there crying about it.
I am overwhelmed. I mean, we know what Operation Blessing does, but just to see that, the devastation, and to know that these people would have been just in horrible straits without it.
The suffering is unimaginable. You just imagine what it would be like that you don't have any money, and all of a sudden your electricity is out. You don't have a telephone, you don't have internet, you don't have any way of communicating with the outside world. You have no food, you have no water. I mean, it is a desperate plight. And we're in there to help people, but of course it's going to take some money to do it, and we need your help on that one too. So it's 1-800-700-7000. And remember, Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. It's going to go on for a while. I mean, you've got these disasters all the way up and down. You had that terrible flooding in Texas. Then you've got this terrible flooding in North and South Carolina. And you've got this awful hurricane that came into Florida and then swept up into Alabama and Georgia. The people are suffering, and we're going to help them every way we can. And you want to be part of doing that. So give us a call and say, look, you can count on me.